today's AVST live webinar. Our topic today is Centralizing Your Mission Critical Voice Infrastructure. Neil Butler, our Director of Sales Engineering, will be presenting. And before we get started, I just want to let you know that the slides will be available for download. I'm going to go ahead and post those in the handouts area here in just a moment. And we will also send those out to you via email once we conclude today. And you can also look forward to getting a link to the recording of this session. So in case you get interrupted or you have coworkers that might enjoy the content, you can make that available to them as well. And then we will have time for Q&A, so you're welcome to type your questions in at any time during the session, and we'll have those queued up for Neil, and I'll of course remind you once we get to that point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Neil.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. This is always an interesting one to do. A lot of our webinars are very wide in scope and talks about part of our product that applies to everyone. But there definitely are some of our webinars that are a little more finely focused, and this is one of them in terms of centralizing your mission-critical voice infrastructure is all about consolidation, and it's typically for customers that have multiple sites. And the story's a little different. All the same features work, but the architecture gets a little more challenging and a little more interesting. So if you think about, an enterprise, the word enterprise is another one of those sort of wide phrases. We tend to think of enterprises as larger accounts and more typically multi-site accounts. So lots of employees scattered across lots of offices, and almost every one of them grew organically, where they opened up a new office, they bought a competitor, they merged together, and as
Neil,
part of that.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm still seeing the title slide.
Ah.
If you want to, I don't know if it's on pause or, there we go. Thanks.
Are you hinting that I left it on pause?
No, not at all.
No, you're stating. Okay, good enough. So here's that slide. What we find with enterprises is they weren't lucky enough, to merge and buy and do those kind of things with the same kind of product. So the infrastructure got very complex. And yes, there's typically long-term programs to get it all simplified and consolidated down, but it stays very, very complicated. There's almost nothing you can do in a large enterprise to stay on top of that kind of issue. So as people are looking at consolidating, and on the one hand, they want to keep their assets in play as long as possible. If you have a phone system, let's say, and it's working fine, and yes, there's a lot of press about all these new wonderful phone systems, and you're probably interested, and you may even have a plan, but maybe you want to get another year or two out of that asset. And the problem is, as you upgrade your assets one at a time, you need to make some very wise choices. Otherwise, you're controlling what your future is, maybe without thinking about it. So the trick, of course, for people as they start to upgrade parts of their infrastructure is to keep interoperability in mind. The whole unified communications market is just very, very complex right now. And as many choices as you have, the better off you are, because you're not really sure where you're going to be in a year or two. So we like to kind of position ourselves as one of the best choices, because let's say you have to remove the call processing, the messaging and call processing element in your infrastructure. You want to consolidate it down. You have some systems that are end of life. By picking our product, you're not sort of locking yourself into an architecture. You can still go ahead with all the rest of your organizational upgrades, whether that's moving to a specific voice over IP telephone system, moving to the cloud, all these things that you might consider doing, you'll still have those choices. So I think it's important to think about us as sort of the last of the large independent players. We've been around a long time, and we have a lot of product out there, a lot of users, and I think most of them are happy users. And we've specialized in making sure that the people who sell our product can walk into any door in any building and basically describe all the wonderful things we can do without having to then hand a list to the customer with all the things they have to upgrade and replace. We are by far the leader in interoperability, whether it's telephony integrations, email connectivity, network architecture, flexibility in the cloud. There's just no question that we're the leader. And in all of those solutions, we're recognized as one of the best of breed lists. So, Gartner will tell you we're the best of breed in unified messaging. If you look at the legacy voicemail replacement, the numbers will show you, that's another market that we lead. So we think we're a good choice in an enterprise who's sort of struggling to figure out how to get their handle around all the different kind of solutions in their enterprise. We have learned over the years that all of our products sort of have a focus for individual workers, a separate focus for businesses, and lately it's gotten more complex also to support teams, with the concept of a team not being 5 people down the hall in a conference room anymore. It's a much more complex kind of working scenario. So we definitely spend time looking at all of those factions. And so should you. When you look at replacing a system, we talk to a lot of people who say, oh, all we're doing now is replacing our voicemail system because it's out of support, and right now we're just going to get a voicemail system. But you have to understand that that application you buy will be the backbone of your unified communication system in a very short time. And if you don't make the right choice for just the voicemail replacement, you're going to find yourself not in a good space when it comes time to looking at the unified communication side. So when we look at enterprises, today we definitely have a lot of conversations about replacing the mission-critical voice apps that are out there today. And it's quite often the conversation starts with a like-for-like. I just want voicemail, maybe some automated attendant menus. Maybe I have a little bit of email integration that I have in mind, but it's really more a financial and good governance kind of decision than it is, going for the rings and getting all the new features. And while we can do this, at the same time, we spend a lot of our time, our product development time on the UC side. So when you look at things like unified messaging, personal mobility, speech-enabled solutions, all of those, we have leading applications in those areas. I would say 9 out of 10 of our systems that we start with the conversation of just voicemail, 9 out of 10 end up buying more than voicemail. They don't buy the whole suite, but we definitely get to a point where we present our product and they go, oh, yes, that's a current problem we have right now, and it's very easy since all of our solutions run on this one platform. Adding new features is software, and it tends to be much more financially reasonable than those vendors who say, well, let us add 2 more servers for you to do that. So we do definitely tend to move the application sale into a few more areas for most of those customers. And we try and have the conversation about, what's down the road next year or 3 years or 5 years, because I don't think there's a large enterprise out there that doesn't have, stacks of paper on their desk marked cloud and IP. Maybe they're evaluating Skype for business. Major changes they're looking at. We want people to be comfortable that when you go in that direction, you're able to use our product to do that. So as we look at the kind of things we kind of bring into the whole scope, we certainly have interoperability covered. Whatever you have now, whatever you're going to, we're kind of lined up on that. And then we have the core voice. We've been an automated attendant and voicemail system for over 30 years. We have every feature I think we've ever added, which makes us the most robust and the easiest to replace like for what you have. But we haven't spent a lot of time just on voicemail. We have found the biggest challenge in the last 10 years is personal mobility. And in that area, we focused on unified messaging first, starting over 20 years ago, and then personal assistant, speech, and a nice new security mobile app that we have. We've definitely spent time, big challenge for enterprises. And the security side of it, the application connectivity side of it, it's something that people have to spend quite a bit of time getting their head around. Lately, we have our informal call center product, TeamQ. We're not going to talk about that product in this webinar, but we have quite a few webinars that do talk about that. That's something that's really hitting home in almost all of our large enterprise customers, where when we say we want to talk about it, they're kind of hesitant, and then we aren't too far in before they say, oh yeah, Doris in accounting told me she has this call handling problem. This would be perfect for that. And then lastly, and we really don't spend enough time on this one, what we call business process is really the fact that we have custom application development tools that run on our platform. So if you're thinking you need an IVR, well, that's a software license on the CXE product. And you can write your own apps with it. It's an industry standard kind of application development process. We can write them with our professional services group, and we even have some canned packaged ones. So keep in mind, if you have additional communications problems that you just don't think anyone's going to have a product for, if you're having a conversation for us, you should bring that up, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised in terms of what we can do. So as we kind of talk about wrapping up the interoperability piece, I think it's just good to note that because of who we are, we're not owned by a PBX company or a router company or anybody else, and this product that we make, has been fitting into environments since 1985, and we've stayed on top of that. We have more native integrations to telephony than anyone else by far. Almost everyone else has gone down the, I make a voicemail, so I'll make, connections to mine. If not, you have to use a gateway kind of methodology, whereas we build native integrations to all the major products today still. We also support gateways, but sometimes there's a real advantage to having a native integration. In terms of, from an email point of view, we connect everything out there that's popular, Office 365, Gmail, the cloud pieces that are getting a lot of play right now, all the Exchange, of course, but things like GroupWise, where it's still around, Notes, we still have a great integration with Notes, and pretty much anything that's IMAP capable. And that includes the ability for you to have multiple systems, 2 Exchange servers in different domains, Exchange migrating to Office 365, Novell migrating to Exchange. All of that is supported on a single system in our point. And then IM in Presence, again, our mobility webinars go into a great deal on what we do with that. And then all of those other things that we have to touch. We're doing a pretty good job at making it so that you can spend your time considering the solutions and not having to worry about the environment changes that would have to be made. Probably the biggest challenge today, and this certainly holds true when we talk about enterprise consolidation, is the cloud side of it, the private cloud and the public cloud. And I think there's more misinformation out there in our industry on the web today than there ever has been in terms of how this all works and what it does and what you'd want to use. And I think this is probably something that we all need to spend a little more time talking about as we evaluate the kind of solutions we do. We're not going to talk about the solution side of it today. We'll definitely have other webinars where we talk about the kind of the hybrid cloud piece that I think everybody is taking a look at right now. But for this one, we're going to mostly talk about centralization and resiliency. I'm a large enterprise. I have 8 locations. I have 4 kinds of phone systems. I have narrowed it down to 1 email system over the last couple of years, and I've seen a really good ROI from having it centralized. And now I'm just looking through my enterprise, finding other things that I can do that same thing for. If I could lower my cost that much for maintaining my Exchange infrastructure, let's say, then I must be able to do the same thing on the telephony side. And that's what people look to do. And when you look at our product, over the last 20 years, or maybe 15 years, our focus has been large enterprise. Not that we don't do a fine job down in the SMB market, but we have added the things in that these larger enterprises need, particularly when they're looking at centralization. We have the most feature-rich disaster recovery and high availability architecture, bar none. And we'll go head-to-head with anyone that wants to talk about it. We do, very tolerant servers. We do everything on VMware and Hyper-V. We do multiple servers for reliability. We have full on-site redundancy. We have disaster recovery. We have geo-redundancy. We support multiple integrations, up to 10 different types of phone systems at a single time. But we also use gateways for those opportunities where that is the correct element to use. We emulate the user interfaces for all the legacy systems to eliminate the disruption when you do that. We support multiple time zones. Users can be in different time zones. Different dialing plans, so if you have a numbering conflict, we have ways to work around that. And then, of course, multilingual support. As we talk about all these features, one of the biggest ones that we're seeing as people start to look at getting rid of some of their legacy TDM and starting to centralize things down, virtualization becomes a major topic. And that's fine with us because we've done our homework. We not only run on VMware, we're certified. You can go to the VMware Ready page and see all our certifications there. Every component we have can be virtualized. The one thing we need to be careful of, if you have an older legacy PBX and you want to virtualize the connection to that, which means you can't have cards in a server, that's one of those places where we're going to use a media gateway. Dialogic Media Gateway does a great job for that. But other than that, Everything can go on VMware. And we don't just work on VMware, we leverage VMware. In other words, the features in VMware that people want to use, like vMotion, fault tolerance, disaster recovery, all of that works. And that's not always the case in other people who will just sort of let you run it there, but then they have a list of caveats of what you can really do. You can set up on a single host, a full CX system, and then using fault tolerance and disaster recovery, have automatic failover to a shadow copy. Basically, that's the kind of things people buy VMware for. We've also added the same kind of support for Microsoft Hyper-V. This is a little newer. It's only been out about 6 months now, but it does the same kind of things, and we support the same width of environment. In other words, there's very few things you can't do. We do not support our never fail, our multiple system servers, on a Hyper-V environment, but if you're using Hyper-V, you probably don't figure you need that kind of two-way redundancy anyway. So let's take a look at our architecture, because then we'll talk about what we can do within the enterprise. There's really two pieces of software that make up a CXE system. There's the call server, which is really the workhorse. This is what answers calls, runs the application, plays the prompts, records the messages. It does all the real work. All the real-time things, interactions, comes through the call server. And you can have anywhere from 1 to 20 call servers. Controlling those call servers, we have at least one system server, or the brains of the system. This is the centralized user database, the message store, the admin interface. This is a system that keeps everything in sync. And unlike any of our competition, we support anywhere from 1 to 3 of those systems. This is how we do that high availability, and we'll look at that down a couple of slides. So call servers are nice. They're different than using gateways. A customer that has 8 sites, almost all of our competition will sort of put their system in at one of the main sites and then start dropping media gateways at all the other sites, which works, but it puts you kind of at the mercy of the data network. By putting call servers in, if the data network fails, the call server is an active application. It continues to run. It takes messages, runs all of our apps, speech rec, automated attendant, custom IVR, everything that we do. Now, once we've recorded a message, we can't, if the network is down, move it to the system server, so we cache it. So users can't get to those messages that have come in that are new. But as soon as the system comes back up, everything automatically syncs back up and you're back in business. And of course, there's other things we can do to take it beyond that. You can certainly put in multiple call servers to cover for a call server failure at a single site. It's extremely easy to match up that whiteboard drawing that the customer puts up with all their sites and what they want to do with this huge set that we have in terms of components to deal with. So if I just take kind of a system, an average system here, I've got a customer, they've got a call server and the system server at their main site, and then they have a couple of call servers at the other site. Now, if you lose the cloud, if you lose a connection, those remote call servers are highly survivable. This is where we said they continue to work, run all the applications, take all the messages. The only indication is a user calls and logs into those, and they will hear that the system is down and call back later. Likewise, if you lose one call server out at site 2, the other one takes over. Yes, you've lost some capacity, but there are actually ways around that as well. So survivability through call servers is kind of one of the key pieces we have. And remember, we have 20 call servers, which means I can have 10 sites with full redundancy with 2 call servers at each site, or 20 sites that have an active element out on it. Our competition tops out at 3, and one of them does 3 and one of them does 2 for our main competition. So we really are in a unique position for a larger enterprise to take care of their reliability needs, no matter how complex their architecture. Now, the next thing we can do in terms of kind of taking that up a step is we can put in a pair of system servers running in active passive mode. So what this means is the blue one there, that's the active one, and it is talking to the call servers, making the database changes, connected to the admin clients. It's doing all the work. But it has software on it that real-time is making the passive server an exact copy. So that passive server sitting over there is within a second of being the exact duplicate of the system server. So if the system server fails, or if the health routines that the passive system is running to monitor the active system tell it it's in trouble, that passive system will promote itself. It'll shut down the active system, make itself the active system, continue. It typically takes over the IP address from that, so it's still in contact with all the call servers, and basically everything just keeps right on running. You don't lose calls in progress or anything else. So hopefully some alarms go off, and somebody comes out and fixes whatever was wrong with the system server, repromotes it, it takes back over. Now, any changes that happened while you were in that failover mode are now replicated reverse back. So you don't ever have to copy things over like you do in some of the other systems. This is, you basically say, I'm ready to go. I know my original server is ready. Let me promote it. It comes up, it takes over, and it starts moving all the information that was new, that was put on that passive server. So new messages that were left, new program changes, everything. And then to take it one more step, we basically have the ability to do geo-redundancy. We can either put a third system server or even the second system server, if that's what you'd rather do, in a remote site. As long as you have decent latency, these sites can be across the country. They work fine that way. The only difference here is if you lose your main site, that remote geo-redundant server doesn't take over automatically. And the reason is, rather than lose your main site, you're more likely just going to lose your link between those. And we don't really want that remote system server trying to take over. You end up with split brain, which is not a good thing. So anything from a single server with highly redundant components, dual power supplies, etc., up to 3 system servers for on-site redundancy and geo-redundancy, and up to 20 call servers. So we're really in a good position, as I said, to match those architectures. So we have great administration. We have a whole webinar, I think, coming up in the next couple of months on our admin, not just the normal admin we do, but all the new things we're doing with it. We have a nice new little mini admin client that's web-based for administrators as they're wandering around the campus to be able to go in and do those important changes. We have multiple points of integration with Active Directory and Unimax and several other products as well, and we just have a really strong story there. Even though we have these multiple sites and locations, it's all maintained with a single admin client, and that single admin client does a really good job. If we sort of look at our architecture choices, here's kind of a pretty typical kind of choice where I have the call servers, and I have a couple of call servers and a system server integrated on a single site. And this is kind of our, maybe our basic deployment. Now keep in mind, you can put a call server and system server, the software for both those, onto a single physical server. There's no problems with that at all. You can run every bit of software we have on a single physical server up to 96 ports with both of those on there. But more typically in the larger enterprises, for redundancy, scalability, etc., you're going to see multiple call servers. When we talk about how to handle remote sites, and I've referenced this a couple of times, we do support dialogic media gateways. Dialogic media gateways can hook to a PBX, typically using older legacy TDM connections, station set emulation, T1 or E1 QSIG connections, that type of thing, and it converts it to a SIP stream that goes out across the network. So that's one way that you can support a remote PBX connecting back into a consolidated system. Now, call servers do that same thing. The difference is call servers have a part of an application on it. So if you use a call server to a remote site and your network connection fails, the call server continues to run, answers the phone, runs all the applications, takes messages, etc. And the downside for this for some people is it is a server running on Windows, so there's a certain maintenance element there where you're going to want to be doing updates and patches to it. A DMG, on the other hand, if the network fails, that's just a translator. Basically, there's no app, there's no logic, so those processes go ring no answer. But the upside to that one is minimal maintenance by IT staff. This is literally just a box that you put into a web. There's no upgrading the software or anything else. So what you need really in the perfect world is to have a choice between those two, and that's what we offer. So if you kind of look at one of the ways to do a kind of deployment is we could put call servers out at sites. Maybe you have a couple of sites that are important to you, so you put dual call servers. A couple of smaller sites, you put single call servers, and then maybe you even have a remote site with an IP PBX. You simply point that back to the call servers at the main site. So what we're able to do here is give you exactly the mix of redundancy and reliability that you want. And we can take it that step further with media gateways. Particularly in large enterprises, if I take like a typical healthcare customer that has maybe 8 hospitals and 20 medical clinics, which is very typical kind of configuration in that market, what we typically do is we go out and put call servers in all the hospitals. Hospitals are important. They don't want them to not work if the network goes down, so they'll have their own call servers. But they'll still be centralized back to the main data center, so they're a single system, easy to administer, easy for all the users. Maybe they'll go out to another site that has a medical clinic, and they'll put a DMG or 2 DMGs in for reliability, for redundancy. And that's because out of those medical clinics, they don't really have a full-time IT staff, and that's just a lot easier to do. And then maybe at another site, they'll put a call server in, and they'll put maybe the tertiary or secondary system server in. So that's your geo redundancy, and you still have that site with a direct IP. Now that direct IP PBX may go straight back to the call servers at the main data site. You may also choose to put a call server there, not because it's required, but just for reliability. Again, if that IP PBX is connected back to the call servers at the main site and you lose the data network, those functions go ring no answer. But if you have a call server there, you're in pretty good shape. So if we look at the toolkit available when we sit down with a customer, we have up to 752 ports, or 500 ports if we're running our advanced ASR, speech recognition applications. That supports about 40,000 users. We're comfortable with that number. We don't license users, so could you get 42,000 on there? Probably. Above 40, we want to look at the usage, what applications you have and things like that. There's really no fixed limit, but we're real comfortable saying at 752 ports, you can support 40,000 users, no problem. And 20,000 of those can be configured for full unified messaging. And then we have those 20 call servers and those 3 system servers. And once again, if you look at a single call server, and this is a call server also running combined with a system server, can have 144 ports if you're not using speech and 96 ports if you are. And then the maximum number of systems on a number of phone systems integrated to a CX is 10. That's not 10 phone systems, that's 10 phone system types. So if I put 4 Avaya communication managers in, that's one type. I go ahead and put Skype in, and that's a second type. I put 3 Mitels in, that's a third type. I put 2 NECs in, that's a fourth type. As you can see, it's not very limiting. We have yet to have a customer with an architecture so complex that we couldn't match it. If you look at kind of this consolidation, we have a number of case studies, and you can get them from us. They're on our web, and you can contact us, and we'll gladly send you probably more than you'd want to read. But one of the ones we talk about, because it's kind of the classic example, is the University of Toronto. University of Toronto, when they started, had 3 campuses. They were Centrex. The 3 campuses had 3 separate Octel systems on them. They had, it was a fairly large deployment. It had 11,000 users and 72,000 students, some of which who had voicemail and some of which who didn't. And their challenges were, they were tired of having 3 separate environments like that. They wanted to centralize. They wanted to replace the legacy Octel system. They wanted to make sure that replacing them was painless, so they were looking for a good telephone user interface on the system that mimicked that, and that's certainly something we do. And then this is one of those customers that after a few meetings started saying, you know, as long as we're going to do this, there's a couple of things we can do. And they put a couple of special applications in, and they deployed unified messaging. And unified messaging for them was a challenge because they had multiple email type systems. So this is almost the typical enterprise that we end up going into, where they're large, they're multiple sites, they have some concerns, and when we're done, now they have everything they wanted. Plus, if down the road they say, wow, Centrex isn't for us, they can leave their entire architecture deployed the way it is and handle whatever direction they want to go in. If they say, you know, we're going to get rid of Exchange and we're going to go to Gmail or Office 365 in the cloud, that's simply a matter of programming the system. So it's a very safe thing for customers to do to get this first part of the consolidation done using our product, even though they're not completely sure maybe where they're going with the rest of it. So if you look at the way we sort of approach this, you know, given our choice, we would come in and present everything because we think we have a very compelling story across the board. But most customers are solving a problem. Most customers are saying things like, I need to get rid of my legacy voicemail system. I just want voicemail and call processing. Or I want to deploy unified messaging, but I have some real concerns about confidentiality and compliance issues. I need something very flexible. And if that's the conversations where they start, that's fine. But like I say, we'll usually get a chance somewhere in there to just make them aware. And the last thing I would want is for somebody to roll out a CX with unified messaging, be thrilled with it, and then go out 2 months later and buy an external IVR system because they didn't understand they really already owned that. They already owned that functionality on their system. So it's all about having those conversations and making sure, even though you're not interested in everything at once, you at least know the feature set that's sitting there. So call processing and voice messaging, unified messaging, and lately an awful lot of personal assistant, an awful lot of focus on the mobile employees. It's getting harder and harder for mobile employees. Somebody working at their desk, when a customer calls them, they really expect to get through real time. And of course, we know the numbers for that are much, much worse than that. But that's what they hope for. When you go mobile, those numbers get ridiculous. So we've got some call completion technologies in both the speech-enabled side and the context-aware side that are unique. So that's another conversation we like to have. So if you look at kind of the enterprise in general, this is just a sampling of our enterprise customers. And marketing loves these slides because, they show that even though you may not have heard of us when this process started, we're not a new kid on the block. We've been around since, been selling actively in the market since 1985, and we have, hundreds of thousands of customers and millions of users. And what's interesting is all these people deployed the product in a slightly different manner. So we talked about the University of Toronto. They consolidated down 3 sites. First Energy consolidated down, I think, 45 sites using a mix of on-site call servers, Dialogic media gateways, all of that. Clorox actually deployed using separate systems at every one of their sites. They wanted the ability to buy and sell, the various parts of their enterprise, and to do that they wanted self-contained units, but they also wanted to maintain them as one, and we have that ability. We can support multiple complete standalone systems that are actually maintained by one admin client. So when we talk about, why we do business, how we get business, how we earn that business, this is just some of the categories. A lot of it starts with the legacy voicemail replacement because there's so much going on in the enterprises today that very few people are thinking, I should go buy a better voicemail and call processing system. There's just so many urgent things going on that that's not generally where it starts. Like I say, it starts with one specific need, and then when we get in, we get a chance to talk about all these areas that we really excel in, and very few customers come away without buying 2 or 3 of these categories. And the great nature of our product, the way it's licensed, is you can buy some now, and then you just buy more later. And we send you a new license, you install that license, you have those new features. So as an enterprise, as you look at moving forward and consolidation and the things you worry about, hopefully you've seen what you need to in this presentation to at least want to have a conversation with us when that time comes. And now it's time for someone else to talk.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Neil. Okay, so it is time for the Q&A. We have a couple, at least 1 or 2 questions in here already. If you'd like to submit a question, use the orange arrow in the upper corner to expand your webinar panel, and then you should see the question box toward the bottom. So Neil, first question, is there a max number of DMGs?
Oh, yeah, there is, but I think it's something like 244. There's a couple of maximums, like there's a maximum, I think, of 6 DMGs per call server. There's a bunch of different kind of ways we address this. Keep in mind, a lot of our maximums are not hard maximums. They're maximums that come about based on what we have the capability of testing. So we talk about 40,000 users. That's the number we throw out, but we have customers with more than 40,000 users. We talk about no more than 3 types of PBX integration per call server, but when someone needs more than that, we have a process called the Complex Solutions Group that goes in and looks at that, and we do indeed have 2 customers in Europe that have 5 different types of phone systems. So those maximums, while we have them and they're published, you should really talk to us about what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great. Next question, does the system server plus call server architecture allow for virtualization or limit virtualization?
So it did up until recently. The one limitation we had recently was if you install it as I described as a combination system server and call server, you couldn't virtualize that on VMware. And the reasons were just some obscure underlying ways that some of the things work. But just in the last software release, we managed to fix all those. So now you can actually have full redundancy with 2 servers on the VMware side. So you can have a combo system server, call server, and you can have a second host that's sitting and ready to go, both for never fail and virtualization.
Okay, great. All right, there's one more question about getting the slides, which I will handle. We will make the slides available. Actually, if you find the question box and just below there, there's a handouts area. You can download the PDF version of the slides there, and I will also send that out in a follow-up email later today along with the recording if you want to download those at that point. Another question, Neil, can we terminate SIP trunk, terminate on system server?
So you have to have the call services or the call server software loaded. Because that's what the software that actually knows how to answer a call. But yes, you can have a combo system server, call server, all in one box, and you can bring SIP trunks into it, no problem at all.
Okay, great. Well, I'm scrolling through, and it looks like actually that wraps us up for questions, unless anyone's still typing. So just want to thank everyone for joining. Look forward to getting a link to the recording as well as the slides if you'd like to review any of this content. And thanks, Neil, as always, for presenting, and I'll go ahead and let you give your parting words as well.
Thank you, Ann. Once again, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. There's so much information about these kind of solutions, and we've hopefully broken it down into small, palatable chunks. A lot of people come to our webinars, and that's always a good thing. And but we'd still like to hear back from you. If we're not covering what you want, or if there's some things you just haven't, we haven't done, and you'd like to see if we could do a webinar on them, we're always happy to do that. Plus, we're always happy to hear from you on anything at info@avst.com. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.